Hey Adam, you know, one of the very first videos, in fact maybe the first video that we shot together was showing your ZF-1 project. And now 4 years later, I think it's about time to revisit the status of that project.
There's been a lot of requests as to what the heck is going on with that project. And this is not what's going on with it. This is what we were talking about on that original build. So just to give a little history, I was obsessed with the ZF-1 from the moment the movie came out in '98, if I'm not incorrect.
Yep.
And then I befriended the wonderful model maker Sean Morgan via the Replica prop forum in 1999. He and I started doing research on this. A friend of mine got me one of the pods. I used it to scale, and sometime in the early 2000s, for a couple of years, I spent a tremendous amount of time doing some really detailed 3D drawings in SketchUp of all programs. It's not necessarily ideal for such fiddling mechanical work, and yet I brute forced it and did all these 3D drawings of the entire assembly and sort of pressed forward with this thing right up until you interviewed me about it 4 years ago with the hopes of one day finishing it.
Right, and it really is an assembly. As a prop, of course, this is Zorg Industries ZF-1 from Fifth Element. They made multiple versions of this.
Yes.
Working, firing ones, some for the net, one for just the missiles.
One for a flamethrower, one for the cold thing, yeah, and one that fired actual ammunition or fired blank rounds. And the one that fired blank rounds, you can actually see, I think down here, the curved magazine of an AK-47 chassis.
Right.
That is visible as like a continuity error in the film for when they wanted to fire it.
Right. So as a prop, the prop makers, they built this with the design in mind, but with lots of real-world parts put in.
Well, so before we get to that, I want to point out, oh, sorry, you're going to talk about the rocket.
Yes.
Right. That's one of the first things I was able to personally identify, was that the rocket was this Estes rocket called Bullpup that is still being produced.
Yeah.
And also I recognized, well, there was the front of a little butane lighter. That front end of the torch that I had at the time was visible on the model. So I used those two things as scale to try and get the thing right. And again, I spent more than 10 years on it. And then a guy named Marcel Rouly, one of the RPF guys, got access to a real one and made measurements. Now here's the thing. My measurements are all close.
Yeah.
But they're not exact.
No.
And as soon as I found out there was an exact one, I ordered a set of parts from Marcel and eventually put together this. Now these are castings I made for my personal kits in order to be able to put this together. Some of these are Marcel's parts, some of them are my parts, most of them are Marcel's. Ooh. Except for the pod stuff. The pod stuff I did. And
scale-wise, it looks a little bigger.
It is actually, it's incredibly close. There are so many ways. Like the barrel's a little bigger. The parts are all a little bit, well, sometimes they're larger, sometimes they're smaller.
Right.
It shows deeply the scale problems one has
when using just screenshots from VHS as a reference.
Yeah.
And scaling from one piece, that butane head, all the way to a big prop.
It's crazy. And I mean, the research that I went to, I don't remember if we talked about this in the first video, was all the way towards, in the German edition of the DVD of The Fifth Element, there's a behind-the-scenes shot of one of these taken apart as effects guys are working on it. And this was like really important for understanding the structure. So I own a copy of Die Fünfte Element in my DVD collection. But this is all by way of teasing the audience. Whoop. So that we could finally show the completed, the finished, the glorious ZF-1. Boop, we turn it on, all the lights work. We have the yellow button. We have the red rocket LED. We've got the red button. We've got the screen in the back with blinking lights. We've got the targeting computer up there. We even have the glowing lights that are sticking down, visible in some of the shots, pointing down above these little things here. Every aspect that I could see on the real gun is actually extant here.
Oh my God. Can you walk us through a little bit of the fabrication? So you have some real world parts, right? This ST's rocket.
Right.
You have that butane head, but a frame inside here that you can make. That's all machined.
This is all. So much of this is custom. It's actually astounding. Matt Munson was the RPF guy who figured out that this back part was actually modified pieces of a Star Trek Enterprise model.
Or Voyager.
A Voyager, that's
yes.
it. It's a Voyager
I had that model. Yep,
Yes,
the
right.
bottom of the Star Trek Voyager.
And there's also, I think, some Voyager parts here. I think that's also part of that. The central framework, of which there's a pair of aluminum plates, is totally custom, potentially water cut back then. Each of these parts is custom machined. I always thought that this was some kind of industrial thing, but I never was able to find it. There are some actual brass pieces in here from air equipment. They used some of this to fire actual practical effects through, like the fog and this brass rod right here. That was to light the flamethrower. That was to actually make to make it shoot flame. So the effects team built effectively one purpose-built for each of the things the thing is demonstrating its abilities. So when he fires the net gun, they had one, which I believe Prop Store now owns.
That's right.
With the net gun right in there. They had one with the flamethrower. They had one. I mean, it's a tremendous amount of work.
And so this is it. I mean, we've talked in the podcast about you've mentioned that when you finish a prop, it lives next to your bedside and you get to admire it. And this is in a state where it can live by your bedside.
It is no exception. I will tell you that I did finish it a few weeks ago, and it did live on my bedside table for about a week.
All right.
I'm so relieved and gratified to finally see it. You just told me the actual number of how long I've been working on this gun.
Yeah, 17 years.
That's ridiculous. This is, I think, just as old as my kids.
And we've seen you over the past 4 years, from time to time, in between projects. Oh, the liner, you've added that in.
Yep.
Oh,
Find
this
these little
piece,
bits and pieces.
Little bits and pieces. The gun itself, the original prop had a story, but your replica has a story.
The ZF-1, she is done.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adam. And thank you guys for following us along this journey for Adam's ZF-1 project. Of course, many more projects.
Thanks for your patience.
Bye.